When Lunch Fights Back, Wickedly Clever Animal Defenses by Rebecca L. Johnson. Chapter 2, Concealed Weapons. African hairy frog, Trichobatrachus robustus. Trichobatrachus robustus. Distribution: Western Africa, primarily from Cameroon to Democratic Republic of the Congo. Habitat: fast-flowing rivers in lowland rainforests. Size: 4.5 inches, 11 centimeters. A hairy frog's toe pads help it cling to surfaces and also conceal its defensive weapons. An African hairy frog sits in the leaves beside a rushing river. A moment ago, the grass along the riverbank moved ever so slightly. Instinctively, the frog froze. A river otter crouches in the grass. Muscles tensed, it watches the frog and waits for it to get closer. Eventually, the frog relaxes and starts climbing up the bank. The otter springs and catches the frog by one of its front legs. Without teeth or claws, the African hairy frog seems defenseless. But as it kicks out with its hind legs, it unleashes hidden weapons. Pointed bits of bone poke out through the pads on its rear toes. The frog uses the sharp bones like claws. It rakes them across the otter's sensitive nose. Surprised, the otter loosens its grip. The frog wrenches free and leaps into the river's fast-moving current. African clawless otters eat many kinds of small animals, including fish and frogs. It's likely that these otters try to eat hairy frogs, although scientists have never caught one in the act. The sharp tips of a hairy frog's bone claws poke through the skin on its rear toes. You can see that right here. The science behind the story. Many vertebrate animals have claws. A typical claw grows from the end of an animal's toe. It sticks out beyond the toe's tip and is made of a hard material called keratin. That same material makes up your fingernails. The African hairy frog doesn't have claws, at least not typical ones. When threatened, however, it creates effective substitutes. Biologist David Blackburn and his colleagues at Harvard University figured out how the hairy frog deploys its unusual weapons. Blackburn, now an assistant curator at the California Academy of Sciences, used dissections and x-rays to peer inside the frog's hind feet. Blackburn discovered that the last bone in each of the hairy frog's rear toes is pointed and curved. It's shaped like a cat's claw. Just beyond this curved bone is a small bony nodule, Blackburn said. The curved bone is connected to the bony nodule by a piece of tough tissue. Attached to the other end of the curved bone is a muscle. When the muscle contracts, it breaks the connection between the bone and the bony nodule and releases the curved claw-like bone, Blackburn explained. The contracting muscle pulls the curved bone down through the frog's toe. The bone's pointed end pokes through the skin of the toe pad, and presto, an instant claw. If you pick up a nice big hairy frog, the first thing it does is kick its feet and rake its claws against your skin, said Blackburn. How sharp are these claws? They're like the points of really sharp pencils and can certainly give you a good bloody scratch. When danger passes, the hairy frog retracts its bony weapons. The punctures in its toe pads may heal, but inside the toes, the claws are still there, ready for action. So here you can see the bony nodule and the claw-shaped bone in the frog's toe. A view inside the toe of a hairy frog reveals the curved bone that breaks free from the small bony nodule and drops down to form a claw. The orange markings along the sides of a Spanish ribbed newt are where its sharp-tipped ribs will emerge from its skin. Right along here. Spanish ribbed newt. Scientific name Pleurodeles waltl. Pleurodeles waltl. Distribution: Spain, Portugal, and northern Morocco. Habitat: small, deep ponds, lakes, and slow-moving streams. Size: up to 12 inches, 30 centimeters. Another bony breakthrough. The Spanish ribbed newt also uses bones as weapons, but in a very different way. When threatened, it forces the tips of its ribs through the sides of its body. This creates 2 rows of needle-sharp spines. Zoologist Egon Heiss from Austria's University of Vienna has studied the newt, which is a type of salamander. When threatened by predators such as foxes and ferrets, many salamanders flare their ribs to make their bodies look bigger. Spanish ribbed newts, however, have extraordinary ribs. Their ribs are much longer compared to other salamanders and sharply pointed at the tips, explains Heiss. When the newt flares its ribs, their sharp tips press hard against the animal's body wall. So hard, in fact, that they tear right through and poke out of the skin. The Spanish ribbed newt also produces a milky white poison from glands in its skin. It is truly nasty stuff. If the skin secretion touches an animal's eye or mouth, it burns like red hot chili. I know from experience, Heiss said. But if it gets into an animal's bloodstream, it can be deadly, even in small amounts. As the newt's ribs poke out through its skin, the sharp tips become coated with poison. If a predator catches the newt and bites down hard, it gets more than a mouthful of pain. The newt's rib tips act like hypodermic needles, injecting poison deep into the tissues lining the predator's mouth. Spanish ribbed newts may survive most predator attacks, even if the predators don't. When all of the fuss is over, the newts simply pull their ribs back inside their bodies. The holes made by the rib tips heal remarkably quickly, leaving the newts as good as new. You can see the poisoned tips of the newt's ribs sticking out of its side in this photo. You can see them right along here and along here.